Should you hang out with other recovering addicts when you're getting sober? Ultimately, the decision is yours to make. I'm going to give you my stories and my take on it, tell you what worked for me and what didn't work for me. This is Iron Aftercare with Greg, and this is Sober Truck Talk. First of all, excuse the dirty hands. I literally just got off work and I'm rushing to get home. So I'm on my way home and I got to take my kids to school. One point that I want to make, something that I always go back to in my head when I think about this, and especially the last time I had gotten sober, is that the majority of my relapses happened with people that I was in recovery with. You know, whether it was like an inpatient group or an outpatient group, NA, AA, HA, you name it, all across the board. Generally, when I had a relapse, it ended up being with those people that I had met in recovery. Now, some of those times, I'd have friends that I met in recovery that ended up relapsing, and then I joined them a little thereafter. Some of them we relapsed together. Some of them, I relapsed and then they came, to hang out or whatever. But it's always been stuck in my head that there's a common denominator there of my relapses. It's it always happens with people that I had met in recovery. Whether it was maybe they had a new connection or they had a connection that I didn't have. It always seemed to play out that way. It was rarely me just relapsing by myself and then I never went back and hung out with any of those people. It was always some of those people in recovery that relapsed with me. So this last time I've been sober, January 2nd is 11 years for me. January 2nd of this year, 2025, was 11 years sober. Now this last time I got sober, I was locked up for a while and I had a lot of time to think, and I was thinking of all this stuff and thinking about, why I was relapsing, what was happening, what were triggers, what were things that, I wanted to X out all things, that were going to be a trigger for me. I wanted to X out things that had failed for me in the past, and I wanted to avoid them right off the bat. I just didn't even want the pressure. And I started thinking, even when I was at those meetings, I have a lot of different meetings on my thoughts on AA meetings. I don't like to hate on something that I know is help a lot of people, but it doesn't help everybody. It's not a one size fits all, AA and those types of groups and outpatients and inpatients, they're not going to work for everybody. And they didn't work for me at all. And I think a big turnoff for me was seeing people that have been sober for a long amount of time. I know there's a lot of successful people that have gotten sober, and there's a lot of people that I can look up to that have gotten sober. But just being around people that were 20, 30 years sober, still going to meetings, and they hadn't done much with their life, and if they're happy and they're flourishing, that's awesome. But it was not something that I could look to and be I really want that. That was the number one big thing with me. I wanted to surround myself with people that I wanted to be in the future. So that was a huge deciding factor for me to not hang out with anybody that was recovering when I got sober this last time. It's because I wanted to, weightlift, and I wanted to be muscular, and I wanted certain things, and I wanted to go seek out the people that were the best at that, and push myself into their equation, try to push myself into being friends with them and surround myself with them so that I could become one of them and I could see how they live and I could see what they were doing. Being an addict, they say, I've never been on the bandwagon of being an addict is a disease, 11 years later of being sober now, I don't feel like I have a disease. I know that it's still a problem. I know I can't go back to drugs. I know that I'm easily addicted to them. but it's not like a reoccurring thing on a daily basis that I have to like keep in check all the time. You know, it's something that I can kind of keep on the back burner these days. And when I was getting sober, you know, I wanted to start a new life. I wanted to be a different person. You know, I didn't want to be surrounded in groups weekly. I didn't want to be reminded of all the problems that I have and, you know, all the burdens that I had. I just didn't want to be reminded of it on like a weekly basis. I wanted to start a new life. I wanted to be a new person. I just wanted to be a normal person in society. And I knew that if I went back to those meetings that, like, for me personally, it was going to hold me back. You know, I had to start a new life. Not completely forget the fact that, you know, deep down inside that I'm an addict or that, you know, I had those issues. Like, I always still held on to that. But I wanted to surround myself with normal people. I mean, as normal as it gets, you know, people that haven't, like, you know, weren't knocking off pick and saves to like get money, you know, to go buy drugs on a daily basis, you know. That's my idea of normal. And that's the crazy thing, is when you meet these people that weren't addicted to drugs, you know, and like all the years that I've been sober now and I've met people that, you know, have not been addicted, like they all still got the same mental fucking problems as I do. You know, they all still have the same mental problems as a lot of people do. They just, you know, never touch that stuff, but who knows if they were going to be susceptible to it or not, you know. But I wanted to surround myself with people outside of that community. I knew that hanging out with recovering addicts, even though like the flip side to this, like the argument would be like, you know, you guys can help each other out, you know what's going on in each other's heads, like, you know, hanging out with recovering addicts, they can help you and they can answer a lot of these questions for you or problems that you're having. They can talk you off the ledge. Like, there's a lot of positives to doing that. But as I said before, a lot of my relapses happen with a lot of these people that I met in recovery. And it always gave me a bad feeling, you know, like when I was locked up, and I wasn't around all the meetings every day, and all I was doing was just working out and I was just trying to better myself, I felt good, you know. And I felt that like if I started going to meetings and I started getting around that whole environment again, that it was going to pull me backwards, and it always would put me in a bad mood, you know. Like my vision was always like, I'm going to move forward, I'm starting a new life, I'm going to be, you know, a normal person in society. You know, I don't want to go on a weekly basis worrying about, talking about my problems, being around other people's problems. You know, I was in no shape or form to help anybody at these meetings, you know. Like, I hadn't done anything yet. You know, I had been out of jail. I had no money. I had no friends. I had nowhere to live. I had nothing to offer. You know, I was not here to help anybody. And psychologically, I had to keep myself moving forward to creating a new life and creating the person that I wanted to be. And that just so happened to include me hanging out with people that were not ex-addicts or not people that, you know, were alcoholics or anything like that. And it worked very well for me. I feel like it's kind of like taboo in the, you know, addiction recovery world to say this, but it's what worked for me. You know, a lot of people will take this out of context and say like, you can't just get clean and brush it under the rug like it never happened. But I'm not brushing it under the rug like it never happened. I'm saying that if I just kept going weekly and reminding myself, like, you're an addict, you're hanging out with addicts, you have a problem, you have a disease, and I'm keep feeding this stuff like in my head weekly, it's like, how the fuck can I move forward? You know, how long am I going to be like this for? Like, I don't want to do this shit the rest of my life. You know, I have a good life now. I have, you know, a family, a good job. I have a house to take care of. I have all this stuff going on. Like, the last thing I want to do is be going to meetings, you know, or going to like outpatient therapies or anything like that. And that's me personally. I know a lot of people that live a great life that, were saved by AA, were saved by outpatient therapies. So it's not something that I could knock, but it's not something that, my story is not something that I can't not tell, because there could be other people out there that, feel the same way. And they think that there's no other path, that you have to be surrounded by people that are in the recovery world. All I did was I focused on improving myself on a daily basis, whether it be physically or mentally. I gave myself positive talk, and I made the right decisions that I could at every second of the day. And that sounds really simple, but it was very hard for me. And I did that down to just the smallest little details, where it's like, whatever the right answer is, I was going to make that decision whether I felt like it or not. I was going to work out that day. I was going to eat healthy. I was going to go to all my appointments, and I was going to, pay all my restitutions. I was going to do all this stuff, whether I wanted to or not. I made the right decision, and it built my confidence, and it kept me sober. For me, getting sober this last time, it was like, I didn't want to be a victim. I'm not going to be a victim of addiction. I'm not going to hang on to the fact that, people say that it's a disease the rest of my life. Like, I refuse to believe that. And 11 years later, being sober now, I could say that, for me, it's not true. It's not true. It's not something that I need to keep on going on, like, I've created a new life that I love so much that, like, the thought of, like, using a drug just doesn't even cross my mind. It's not even like I know that, like, if I went back to it, I would put myself right into the back situation that I was before. But I don't want to. Like, it doesn't even cross my mind ever. Never does it cross my mind. And I've been through some dark times, some deep times, some sad times over the last 11 years. And, even so, it's never even crossed my mind to use the drugs, because I spent that time just working on myself and creating myself. And I wanted to create a person that was, so strong that then I could go back and then I could help other people that were recovering. And that's my mission right now. I don't know. I support all people that got clean across the board. All of it deserves merit and all of it's respectable, but not everybody's the same. And, for me, brushing my addiction under the rug and starting a new life and just working on myself and focusing on becoming just a normal part of society, that worked for me. When I was, but that's not going to work for everybody, and I understand that. But I want to put the information out there because it worked for me. I'm completely open for debate for this. So, put your thoughts down in the comments. If you guys like the video, like, subscribe. Otherwise, I'm out.